I walked the graduation stage by myself while my parents hosted a Super Bowl-level party at home. I broke down in the parking lot, then purchased a one-way ticket that ended up changing my life forever. Can you imagine the gut-wrenching feeling of waiting for the most important people in your life on the biggest day of your life, only to realize they chose a football game over you? That day ripped something out of me, but what if that crushing betrayal was actually the gift that set me free? The auditorium was massive, 3,000 seats, but all I could search for were just two faces. My eyes swept frantically across the sea of families, all clutching flowers and balloons, scanning for the people who absolutely should have been there. But they weren't. My phone buzzed right in the middle of the processional march. A text from Dad, "Tell us how it goes. Go Patriots." And right below it, Mom had sent a photo. Their living room, packed to the gills with guests in football jerseys, chip bowls covering every single surface. The timestamp was 1:47 p.m. exactly when I'd reminded them, just yesterday, my graduation ceremony was supposed to start. They'd chosen the Super Bowl party over my college graduation. I walked across that stage, a smile frozen on my face, shaking the dean's hand, accepting my diploma in communications. The photographer captured what looked like a moment of triumph. But nobody could see that I was shattering inside, piece by excruciating piece, with every single step back to my seat. Afterward, I just stood in the parking lot, watching my classmates celebrate. Fathers lifting daughters off the ground in bear hugs, mothers crying happy tears, fixing caps for endless photos. I watched them through a blur, my own tears finally spilling over, hot and heavy. I thought about my older brother, Preston. When he graduated law school 2 years ago, it wasn't just a party. Dad had rented out an entire restaurant, 50 guests, Mom hired a photographer for 2 hours. They framed his diploma before he'd even received it. For me? A text message. And a blurry photo of a Super Bowl party. I just collapsed into my car and sat there for an hour, still in my cap and gown, and I let myself cry. I mean, I really cried. The kind of crying that leaves you hollowed out. Then, almost on autopilot, I opened my laptop and searched for flights. I had $3,400 in savings from my campus job at the library. My lease was up in 2 weeks. I had no job lined up, no real plan. None. I bought a one-way ticket to Seattle for the very next morning. The fare was $340. I'd never been west of Pennsylvania in my entire life. I didn't tell anyone. I just drove back to my apartment, packed 2 suitcases with everything essential, and donated the rest to Goodwill that evening. My roommate, Jenna, was at her own graduation party, so I simply left her a note, thanking her for 2 good years. I texted my parents, graduated. Ceremony was nice. Figuring out next steps. They responded with thumbs-up emojis. The plane took off at 6:20 a.m. I pressed my face against the window as Philadelphia disappeared below me, and I felt something shift deep in my chest. It was fear, mixed with relief, mixed with anger, mixed with freedom. I was actually doing this. Seattle in February was cold and gray. It perfectly matched my mood. I checked into a hostel downtown for $35 a night and started job hunting immediately. I figured I had enough money for maybe 6 weeks, if I was careful. After that, I'd figure something out. Or I wouldn't. Right then, failing in Seattle felt so much better than succeeding anywhere near home. The coffee shop scene here is legendary, and I quickly understood why. Every corner seemed to have 3 options. I applied to 27 different cafes in my first week, walking miles through a rain that never quite became a downpour, but never fully stopped either. My sneakers developed permanent damp spots. On day 9, a place called Rosewood Coffee called me back. The manager, a woman named Kelly, with striking silver hair and the kindest eyes, interviewed me while making a cappuccino so perfect it looked like a painting. "You're pretty far from Pennsylvania," she said, glancing at my resume. "That's intentional," I told her. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You start Monday. Morning shift, 5 a.m. Don't be late." I wasn't late. I was never late. I learned to pull espresso shots, steam milk to exactly 150 degrees, memorize complicated orders involving 4 modifications and specific temperatures. My hands learned the rhythm of the work. My mind found something close to peace in that routine. I found a studio apartment in Capitol Hill for $950 a month. It was 400 square feet with a Murphy bed and a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. I bought furniture from thrift stores and built my life, one small piece at a time. My parents called 3 times in those first 2 months. Brief, almost perfunctory conversations where they asked if I'd found a job yet and mentioned that Preston was up for partner at his firm. I told them I was doing fine, working in coffee, figuring things out. Dad said that was nice, and asked if I'd seen the Seahawks were having a good season. I hadn't watched football since graduation day. 6 months passed. I got promoted to shift supervisor at Rosewood. Kelly started teaching me the business side of running a cafe, letting me handle inventory and scheduling. I discovered I actually had a talent for it. The work satisfied something in me that my communications degree never had. The promotion came with responsibilities I'd never handled before. Kelly handed me the keys one Tuesday morning and said, "You're opening by yourself today. I'll be in by 9. My heart hammered as I unlocked the door in the pre-dawn darkness, but my hands knew what to do. I'd watched her routine so many times it had become muscle memory. I started the espresso machines, their familiar hum filling the empty space. Ground the first beans of the day, their aroma sharp and earthy. Arranged the pastries from our bakery supplier in the display case, each one positioned to catch the eye. By the time our first customer arrived at 5:47 a.m., everything was ready. That customer was Thomas, a software engineer who came every weekday for a double-shot Americano. He looked surprised to see me alone behind the counter. "Kelly finally trusting you with the kingdom," he asked with a grin. "Apparently so," I joked, "let's hope I don't burn it down." "You'll do great," he replied. "You make the best coffee here anyway." Those small validations mattered more than he could have known. Every regular who remembered my name, every compliment on a well-made drink, every busy shift I navigated successfully, they all became building blocks of something new inside me. Confidence, maybe. Or just proof that I could be good at something that mattered to me, not something someone else had chosen for my career path. My communications degree had been my parents' idea. "You're good with people," Mom had said when I was 17, filling out college applications. "Communications opens lots of doors." What she really meant was that it seemed practical, professional, appropriate, not too ambitious, not too risky. I'd never wanted it, but I'd wanted their approval. So, I got the degree. Working at Rosewood taught me something crucial. I actually was good with people, but not in the way my mother had imagined. I was good at creating spaces where people felt comfortable. Good at remembering that Amanda liked extra foam and Trevor always ordered decaf after 2 p.m. Good at knowing when someone needed conversation and when they needed to be left alone with their laptop. Kelly noticed this before I did. "You've got hospitality instincts," she told me during a quiet afternoon. "That's not something you can teach. People either care about making others feel welcome, or they don't. You care." She started showing me the financial side of the operation. How to read profit and loss statements, calculate food costs, manage labor budgets. The numbers told stories if you knew how to read them. A spike in supply costs meant we needed to renegotiate with vendors or find new ones. Labor running too high meant we were overstaffed or inefficient. Everything connected. "You should think about opening your own place someday," Kelly said one afternoon while we were reviewing supplier costs. The idea planted itself in my mind and grew roots. Opening a cafe required capital I didn't have and skills I was still learning. But the dream felt possible in a way nothing had since leaving Pennsylvania. I started researching everything obsessively. How much did commercial espresso machines cost? What were the regulations for food service in Seattle? What locations had foot traffic but reasonable rent? I created a notebook, an actual physical notebook, because I wanted something I could hold. The first page had one sentence: "Horizon Coffee, a place where everyone is seen." Every page after that filled with notes, calculations, sketches of possible layouts, lists of equipment and suppliers. The name came to me during a shift at Rosewood. I was making a cappuccino for a customer who'd just moved to Seattle from Atlanta, and she mentioned how the mountains on the horizon made her feel like anything was possible. That word, horizon, captured exactly what I was chasing, the edge of what was known, the promise of what came next. I kept working at Rosewood, but started picking up weekend shifts at a place called Velocity Coffee in Ballard. Different neighborhood, different customer base, different approach to the business. Velocity was faster paced, higher volume, more focused on efficiency than ambience. I learned their systems, studied what worked, noted what I'd do differently. The owner, a man named Carter, was brilliant at operations, but terrible with people. He'd snap at customers who took too long ordering and treated his staff like automatons. His coffee was excellent. His business sharp. But people didn't linger there. They didn't build community. They grabbed their drinks and left. I learned from his mistakes as much as Kelly's wisdom. A successful cafe needed both great coffee and genuine hospitality. Technical excellence and human warmth. You couldn't sacrifice one for the other and expect people to care about your business. My life fell into a rhythm of work and learning. Morning shifts at Rosewood, evening classes in business management, weekend shifts at Velocity. I slept less than I should have and ate more than one meal standing up over the sink in my tiny apartment. But I was building towards something specific, and that gave every exhausted day purpose. Money accumulated slowly in my savings account. $23 from this paycheck, $52 from that one. I stopped buying coffee anywhere except my own workplace, bringing a travel mug everywhere. I found free entertainment, hiking trails, library events, community concerts in parks. My wardrobe consisted of 3 pairs of jeans, 2 pairs of work pants, and a rotation of dark-colored shirts that hid coffee stains. Friends from college would post on social media about trips to Cancun, new cars, apartments with actual bedroom doors. I scrolled past those posts without envy. They were spending their 20s one way, I was spending mine another. Neither was wrong, just different. I enrolled in a business management course at Seattle Community College, evening classes twice a week. I studied accounting and business law and marketing. I saved every extra dollar, living on staff meals and thrift store clothes. My studio apartment remained sparsely furnished because every purchase required a decision. Was this object worth delaying my dream? A year after arriving in Seattle, I had $12,000 saved. That's when Preston called. He told me he'd made partner. Big celebration next month, he said. Mom and Dad are throwing a party. You should come. I'm pretty busy with work, I replied. It's just a coffee shop job though, right? You can take a weekend off. Something in his tone, dismissive, slightly condescending, made my decision easy. Actually, I can't. Congratulations, though. I didn't go. I heard later that 40 people attended. There were speeches and a cake shaped like a briefcase. Dad cried during his toast about how proud he was of his son. I spent that weekend writing a business plan for my own cafe. I called it Horizon Coffee, a name that represented new beginnings and looking forward instead of back. His words echoed in my head for days afterward, just a coffee shop job. As if the work I did was simply marking time until something better came along. As if serving people, creating welcoming spaces, and learning a skilled trade was somehow less valuable than pushing papers in a law firm. Preston had always been the golden child, but he'd never been cruel about it before. Maybe he didn't realize how his words landed. Or maybe he did, and the years of being the favored one had calcified into a genuine belief that his path was superior to mine. I channeled the anger into something productive. If he saw my work as just a coffee shop job, I'd show him. I'd show all of them what a coffee shop could actually be. My business plan started as rough notes and evolved into a comprehensive document over the following weeks. I researched Seattle's coffee market until I could recite demographic data in my sleep. The city had approximately 2,400 coffee shops, more per capita than any other U.S. city. Competition was fierce, but demand remained high. The key was differentiation. What would make Horizon Coffee different? I wrote pages exploring that question. It wouldn't be the cheapest option or the fastest service. It would be the place that made every customer feel recognized. Where quality was non-negotiable, but pretension was absent. Where someone could sit for hours over a single cup without feeling rushed, or grab something quickly without feeling invisible. The menu would be focused, 12 drinks done exceptionally well instead of 40 mediocre options. I'd source beans from roasters who worked directly with farmers and paid fair wages. The space would have comfortable seating, good lighting for reading or working, and art from local creators on the walls. I projected startup costs, $45,000 for a modest location with used equipment. Operating expenses for the first 6 months while building clientele. Salary for 3 employees beyond myself. An emergency fund for unexpected repairs or slow periods. The total came to roughly $75,000 to launch safely. I had $12,000. The gap between my reality and my goal felt impossibly wide some days, but I kept working. Kelly gave me more responsibility at Rosewood, letting me handle vendor negotiations and staff scheduling. I learned that our pastry supplier was charging us 30% more than their standard rate and renegotiated our contract, saving the cafe $400 monthly. Small victories that proved I could handle business management. At Velocity on weekends, I studied Carter's efficiency systems. He'd optimized every movement behind the counter, reducing wasted motion and speeding up service. His inventory management was brilliant, he never ran out of supplies but never overordered. The man was difficult personally but genius operationally. One Saturday, a customer complained about waiting 5 minutes for a latte during rush. Carter told him, "Then go somewhere else. We're busy." The customer left fuming and probably never returned. I would have apologized for the wait, explained we were short-staffed that morning, and offered a pastry on the house. The apology cost nothing and often turned frustrated customers into loyal ones. Carter saw it as weakness. I saw it as investing in relationships. These observations filled my notebook: what to emulate, what to avoid, what to innovate. I was building Horizon Coffee in my mind months before I'd serve a single customer. My evening business classes provided structure and theory to support my practical experience. I learned about market analysis, competitive positioning, and financial projections. My classmates were mostly older than me, career changers, and aspiring entrepreneurs with various dreams. There was Marcus, who wanted to open a bike repair shop. Lauren, planning a boutique focusing on sustainable fashion. David, who'd spent 20 years in corporate IT and wanted to start a tech consulting firm. We formed a study group that met Wednesday nights at a bar near campus. Over cheap beer and shared appetizers, we'd review each other's business plans and offer feedback. They all thought my cafe idea was solid, but questioned whether I could raise the necessary capital at my age. "Banks don't like lending to people under 25, Marcus said one evening. "You've got no credit history to speak of. No collateral." "Then I'll find a bank that will listen," I replied. "You've got moxie, I'll give you that," Lauren said with a smile. "Just make sure you've got a backup plan." My backup plan was to keep working and saving until I had enough capital to seem like a safer bet, or until I turned 25 and aged into credibility, whichever came first. The months accumulated into a year, then another. My savings grew, $18,000, then $22,000, then $28,000. I was living on an absurdly tight budget, but every dollar I didn't spend brought me closer to Horizon Coffee becoming real. I walked past empty storefronts and imagined my cafe in each one. Too small, wrong neighborhood, no parking, too expensive. I was searching for something I'd recognize when I saw it. A space with potential that others had overlooked. Social media showed me glimpses of my old life. College friends were getting engaged, posting photos from weddings, announcing job promotions. Preston shared pictures from his partner's celebration party. My parents looked happy and proud in several shots, Dad's arm around Preston's shoulders. I felt a familiar ache, but also something new, relief that I wasn't there. Those celebrations had always made me feel small, like I was watching life happen to other people while I waited for my turn. In Seattle, I was creating my own moments worth celebrating. They just weren't the kind that photographed well for social media. Who takes a picture of a perfectly balanced budget spreadsheet? Who posts about successfully negotiating a vendor contract or mastering a complicated drink order? My victories were small and private, but they belonged entirely to me. 2 years in Seattle became 3. My savings account grew to $28,000. I took a second job as a weekend barista at another cafe to learn different systems and approaches. I worked with local roasters and learned about sourcing beans directly from farms. I attended small business workshops and coffee trade shows. The coffee trade show in Portland changed everything. I drove down for a weekend, staying in the cheapest motel I could find, and spent 2 days wandering vendor booths and attending seminars. I learned about new extraction methods, sustainability practices, and emerging markets for specialty coffee. But more importantly, I met people. Roasters who were passionate about their craft, equipment suppliers who understood the financial constraints of small businesses, other cafe owners who'd started exactly where I was, broke and determined. A woman named Yolanda ran a successful 3-location operation in Portland. We sat together during a lunch break, and I asked her every question I'd been storing up for 3 years. She answered generously, treating my inexperience with respect rather than condescension. "The hardest part isn't the coffee," she told me. "You'll figure out the coffee. The hardest part is believing you deserve success when it starts happening, especially for women in this industry. We're taught to be humble, to not take up space. But running a business means taking up space, unapologetically." Her words hit me like cold water. I'd spent 3 years preparing to open Horizon Coffee, but I hadn't spent much time imagining what came after success. I'd been so focused on proving I could do it that I hadn't considered what I'd do when I actually did it. "How do you deal with that?" I asked. "Therapy helps," she said with a laugh. "Also, remembering that every man who opens a mediocre cafe expects to succeed. So, why shouldn't we, with our excellent cafes, expect the same?" I left Portland with a folder full of business cards, a head full of ideas, and something that felt dangerously close to confidence. Kelly retired and offered to sell me Rosewood. The price was fair, but I knew I wanted to build something entirely my own. We hugged goodbye on her last day, and she told me I reminded her of herself 30 years ago. "You've got something special," she said. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I found a location in Fremont, a neighborhood with foot traffic and character. The space had been a bookstore that went out of business. It had good bones, exposed brick, high ceilings, big windows facing the street. The rent was steep but manageable. The renovations would cost about $45,000. I had $31,000 saved. I spent 3 weeks perfecting my pitch, then approached 5 different lenders. 4 turned me down. The 5th, a woman at a local credit union named Marissa, looked at my business plan for 30 minutes without speaking. "This is thorough," she finally said. "Really thorough. Why coffee?" I told her the truth. About graduation day, about rebuilding myself, about finding purpose and creating spaces where people felt welcome, about wanting to build something that was completely mine. She approved my loan. Horizon Coffee opened on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd sent my parents a formal invitation 4 weeks earlier, a beautiful card with the address and opening details. They didn't respond. Preston texted, "Cool. Good luck." 73 people came that first day. The line stretched out the door by 8 a.m. I'd hired 3 baristas, all people I'd met and trusted during my time in Seattle's coffee community. We were slammed. We made mistakes. And it was the best day of my life. The night before opening, I barely slept. I arrived at 3 a.m. to start preparations, even though we didn't open until 6 o'clock. I checked everything 3 times. Were the espresso machines properly warmed up? Did we have enough milk? Were the syrups filled? Did the register have adequate change? My 3 employees arrived at 4:30. Jessica, who'd worked with me at Rosewood. Marcus, from my business class, who decided to postpone his bike shop to help me launch. And Tanya, a recent graduate from a culinary program who made the most beautiful latte art I'd ever seen. You ready for this? Jessica asked, tying her apron. Absolutely not, I admitted. Let's do it anyway. We ran through our opening procedures together, falling into the rhythm we'd practiced during our week of training. Marcus handled the register with surprising ease for someone who'd never worked food service before. Tanya prepped the pastry case with items from our bakery partner, croissants, scones, muffins, and coffee cake arranged to look abundant without being cluttered. Jessica and I would run the espresso bar together. We'd practiced for hours, learning to work in tandem without colliding or creating bottlenecks. She'd call out orders while pulling shots, I'd steam milk and assemble drinks. We moved like dancers who'd rehearsed the same routine until it became instinct. At 5:45 a.m., I unlocked the front door. The hand-painted sign above it read, Horizon Coffee, in letters that had cost $800, an expense I'd agonized over. The interior glowed warmly, Edison bulbs hanging from exposed beams, reclaimed wood tables, chairs that were comfortable, but not so comfortable people would camp all day without ordering. Our first customer walked in at 5:53 a.m. A man in scrubs carrying a hospital ID badge. You're new, he said, looking around. I usually go to the place 2 blocks over, but I saw your sign. First day, I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. What can we make for you? Surprise me. Something with espresso that'll get me through a 12-hour shift. I made him a flat white with an extra shot, using beans from a roaster in Olympia I'd visited twice to taste their entire lineup. The espresso was bright with notes of cherry and chocolate. The milk was silky and perfectly textured. I handed it to him with a sleeve and a smile. He took one sip and his eyes widened. Okay, you're my new spot. This is incredible. Thanks for giving us a chance. He left a $5 tip in the jar. More customers trickled in. Some were clearly curious about the new place. Others had seen our soft opening announcement on neighborhood social media groups. A few friends I'd invited, my study group from business class, regulars from Rosewood who'd followed me to my own venture. Neighbors from my apartment building. By 7 a.m., we had a line of 8 people. By 7:30, that line stretched out the door. The morning rush hit like a wave, and suddenly, we were drowning in orders. Tanya called them out as fast as Marcus could ring them up. Jessica and I flew between the espresso machine and milk steamer, our hands moving in practiced patterns. 2 cappuccinos, 1 latte, 1 mocha, Americano with room, pour over Ethiopia, Cortadou, 3 drips, 2 lattes, 1 oat milk, and an espresso. The orders blurred together. We made mistakes, put whole milk in an order that requested almond, forgot to add the vanilla syrup someone wanted, oversteamed milk and had to dump it. But we recovered quickly, remaking drinks with apologies and smiles. Around 8:30, there was a brief lull. Jessica and I looked at each other, both of us flushed and slightly manic. We're doing it, she said. We're really doing it. My hands shook while making drinks. Happy tears kept threatening to spill over. Every customer who walked through that door represented a choice. My choice to build something meaningful from the rubble of my worst day. By noon, we'd served over 100 customers. The afternoon brought a different crowd, remote workers with laptops, students studying, people meeting friends. They settled into our chairs and stayed, which was exactly what I'd hoped for. A cafe wasn't just about selling coffee. It was about creating a third place, between home and work, where people felt comfortable existing. I circulated through the space during the afternoon, bussing tables and checking in with customers. An older woman reading a thick biography told me she'd been looking for a good neighborhood cafe for months. 2 students working on a group project said the lighting was perfect. A man on a video call gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "Great coffee." Every piece of positive feedback felt like validation. The space worked. The concept worked. The coffee was as good as I promised myself it would be. We closed at 7 p.m. that first day. All of us exhausted and exhilarated. I counted the register while my team cleaned. We'd done $1,847 in sales. After costs, that left about $900 in profit. Not nearly enough to pay the bills yet, but proof that people wanted what we offered. Same time tomorrow? Marcus asked as we locked up. Same time tomorrow, I confirmed. I walked home through the October darkness, every muscle aching, and felt more alive than I had in years. This was mine. This success, these challenges, this exhausted satisfaction, all of it belonged to me. The first week taught us where our systems needed adjustment. We ran out of oat milk on Wednesday and had to send Marcus running to the grocery store. The toilet clogged on Thursday, and I learned that plumbing emergencies happen at the worst possible times. Friday's morning rush was so intense, we fell 30 minutes behind on orders and had to give away free pastries to apologize. But we learned fast. I adjusted our inventory orders to account for oat milk's popularity. I found a reliable plumber and put his number on speed dial. Jessica and I refined our workflow to handle higher volume without sacrificing quality. By the end of week 2, we'd found our rhythm. Regular customers were already emerging, Thomas from Rosewood who had followed me to my new venture. A software developer named Priya who came every afternoon at 2 p.m. for a courtesy. A retired teacher named Frank who sat by the window with the newspaper and a drip coffee. Learning their names and orders felt like collecting treasures. These were my people now. Choosing my cafe over dozens of others. The cafe found its rhythm. Over the following months, we became known for exceptional coffee, comfortable seating, and walls covered in rotating local art. I implemented a program where customers could buy a coffee forward for someone who couldn't afford one. Community began forming in that space, exactly as I'd hoped. The art program started accidentally. A customer named Devin asked if she could sketch while working at one of our tables. I said, of course. And she ended up spending 3 hours creating a beautiful pen and ink drawing of the cafe interior. When she finished, she offered to give it to me. I can't just take your art. I protested. Then hang it on your wall. I want people to see it. I framed it and mounted it behind the counter. 3 customers asked about it that same week. Devin came back with 5 more pieces, and suddenly we had a rotating gallery. I started reaching out to other local artists, offering wall space in exchange for displaying their contact information. The art changed monthly, giving regulars a reason to pay attention to their surroundings. The suspended coffee program came from a conversation with Frank, my newspaper regular. He mentioned that he'd spent 6 months homeless in his 50s after a series of bad breaks. A cafe owner had let him sit inside during cold mornings and occasionally given him free coffee. That kindness mattered more than you'd think, he said. Made me feel human when I was pretty close to forgetting. I implemented a simple system. Customers could pay for an extra coffee that we tracked on a board behind the counter. Anyone who needed it could ask for a suspended coffee, no questions asked. Within a week, we had 30 coffees paid forward. Within a month, we were serving 4 or 5 daily. A woman named Ruth came in every few days to claim a suspended coffee. She'd sit in the corner and work on crossword puzzles, sometimes for hours. After a few weeks, she approached me during a slow period. I got a job, she said quietly. Start Monday. Just wanted you to know I won't need the free coffees anymore. That's wonderful. Congratulations. This place made a difference, she said. Feeling welcome somewhere when you've got nothing? It helps you remember you're still worth something. She became a regular, paying customer after that, always buying an extra coffee to pay forward. These small moments of humanity kept happening, and I documented them in a journal I kept in my office. They reminded me why I wanted to create this space. The Seattle Times food section featured us in a roundup of best new cafes. A local blogger with a significant following declared our courtesy the best in the city. Business boomed. I hired 2 more staff members and started planning to expand our pastry program. The Times feature came 4 months after we opened. The food critic, a woman named Patricia, had visited twice without identifying herself. I only knew she'd been there when the article published, describing our unpretentious excellence and genuine hospitality. She'd given us 4 out of 5 stars, noting that while we were still finding our footing on some operational details, the quality and care were undeniable. Horizon Coffee represents what neighborhood cafes should be, she wrote. Owner and head barista runs the space with obvious love for craft and community. This isn't coffee as commodity or caffeine delivery system. It's coffee as connection. That paragraph made me cry in my office. Someone understood exactly what I tried to create. The article brought a flood of new customers. Some were coffee enthusiasts hunting for the city's best cortado. Others were neighborhood residents who'd been meaning to try the new place and just needed the push. A few were industry people, other cafe owners, roasters, equipment suppliers, who wanted to see what the buzz was about. We weren't ready for the volume. Wait times stretched to 20 minutes during peak hours. We ran out of supplies twice in 1 week. Jessica pulled me aside on a particularly chaotic Thursday. "We need more help," she said. "We're all exhausted, and the quality is starting to slip." I had noticed the complaints. 3 customers had mentioned drinks being too hot or inconsistently made. One had pointed out that their table was dirty. Small failures that would compound if we didn't address them immediately. I hired 2 more baristas that week. Cole, who'd worked at a specialty coffee shop in Portland before moving for his partner's job, and Maya, a chemistry graduate who approached coffee with scientific precision. Both were overqualified and underpaid, but they wanted to be part of what we were building. Training them while maintaining operations was brutal. I was working 70-hour weeks, most of which I spent on my feet. My tiny apartment became just a place to sleep. I ate most meals at the cafe, staff sandwiches and pastries that didn't sell. I stopped seeing friends or doing anything that wasn't directly related to Horizon Coffee. Tanya noticed first. "You're running yourself into the ground," she said one evening after close. "When's the last time you took a full day off?" I couldn't remember. "You need to build sustainability into this," she continued. "If you burn out, the whole thing falls apart. We can't replace you." She was right, but I didn't know how to slow down. Every decision felt critical. Every shift seemed to need my attention. The cafe was my child, and I was a paranoid parent who couldn't let anyone else hold the baby. Marcus, who stayed on part-time while also launching his bike shop, had a different perspective. "You're bottlenecking growth," he told me bluntly. "You've hired good people. Train them properly and trust them. Otherwise, you'll cap out at exactly this size forever." His words stung because they were accurate. I'd built Horizon Coffee to prove I could do it myself, but scaling meant accepting help. Delegation required trust one wasn't sure I had. I started small. Jessica became assistant manager, handling staff scheduling and minor operational decisions. Tanya took over our pastry program expansion, working with local bakeries to develop exclusive items. Marcus managed our books 2 days a week, freeing me from accounting tasks that took hours of my attention. Slowly, I learned to let go of pieces of control. The cafe didn't fall apart. In fact, free from micromanaging every detail, I could focus on bigger picture development. What should our summer menu look like? Should we start selling retail bags of our roasters' beans? Could we host community events in the evening? The pastry program expansion was Tanya's masterpiece. She partnered with 3 local bakeries, convincing them to create items exclusively for us. We got almond croissants from a French-trained baker, savory hand pies from a woman who'd learned recipes from her Jamaican grandmother, and stunning custom cakes from a pastry chef who'd left a high-end restaurant to work independently. Our pastry case became a destination. People started coming specifically for those hand pies or to order custom cakes. Revenue from food sales doubled, then tripled. Tanya's commission-based arrangement meant she earned more as the program succeeded, which motivated her to keep innovating. 6 months after opening, we were profitable. Not wildly so. My salary was still modest, and every extra dollar went back into the business, but sustainably profitable. The loan payments were manageable. We could handle a slow week without panic. The cafe had moved from precarious experiment to viable business. I posted about the Times feature on social media, my first public acknowledgement of what I built. Within an hour, messages flooded in from old college friends. "This is incredible. So proud of you. When did this happen?" My mother called that evening. "We hadn't spoken in 6 months. We saw your coffee shop online," she said. "It looks very nice." "Thank you. You could have told us you were doing this. We would have helped." The audacity of that statement left me speechless for several seconds. Would you have helped? Like you helped on my graduation day? Silence stretched between us. "That's not fair," Mom said quietly. We explained about that. Preston really wanted to host the party, and everyone was already committed. "I'm not doing this," my voice came out steady, despite the anger burning in my chest. "I called to tell you about graduation months in advance. I sent you the exact time. You chose a football party. It wasn't just football. It was a gathering of friends, and I don't care what it was. I needed you there, and you weren't. So I left, and I built something without you. That's done now. I'm calling because I need to say something I should have said 4 years ago." I took a breath, standing in my office with its view of the cafe floor where customers laughed and worked and existed in the space I created. "You made me feel invisible," I continued. "For years, everything Preston did mattered more. Better grades, better school, better career. I understand he's impressive. But I needed you to show up for me, too. Just once. For something that mattered. You couldn't do that, so I stopped needing you. That's a horrible thing to say to your mother. It's a horrible thing to feel about your parents. But here we are." I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but different this time. Stronger. Dad called 3 days later. He said they'd like to visit, to see what I'd built. I told him they were welcome to come as customers during business hours, like anyone else. He sounded hurt, which struck me as almost funny. 4 years of hurt on my end, and he was bothered by 3 sentences. They came 2 weeks later. I was working the counter when they walked in, looking uncomfortable and out of place in their expensive coats. I greeted them professionally, took their order, and made their drinks with the same care I gave every customer. "Could we sit and talk?" Mom asked. "I'm working," I said. "But you're welcome to enjoy your coffee." They sat at a corner table for an hour, watching me work. I felt their eyes, but didn't look over. I was too busy with the afternoon rush, managing staff, greeting regulars, solving small problems, running my business. When they left, Dad stopped at the counter. "You've done something impressive here," he said. "I can see that now. Thank you for coming." They drove back to the airport. I returned to steaming milk and pulling shots, and building the life I'd chosen. Preston visited 6 months later during a work trip to Seattle. He came during an evening lull and actually seemed genuinely interested in what I'd created. We talked for 2 hours about business and challenges and growth plans. He told me about his work, and I found myself interested in a way I'd never been before. We'd both become adults with our own lives, and distance had made relationship possible. "Mom and Dad talk about you differently now," he said before leaving. "They don't understand what you do exactly, but they see that it matters. That's something. I guess it's more than something." Dad showed the Times article to everyone at his golf club. He's proud, even if he doesn't know how to say it. Pride after achievement was easy. Pride during struggle was what I'd needed. But I'd learned to live without their approval, which made receiving it feel less essential than it once might have. Horizon Coffee celebrated its 2nd anniversary with a community party. We served free coffee and pastries, featured live music from local artists, and raised $3,000 for a neighborhood food bank. 300 people came. The cafe had become exactly what I'd envisioned, a gathering place, a community hub, a space where people felt seen and welcomed. I stood outside as evening fell, watching through the windows as people laughed and talked and connected. My staff moved efficiently behind the counter, handling the crowd with grace. Everything worked because I'd built it to work. Piece by piece, choice by choice. Over 4 years of steady effort. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Saw photos online. The party looks wonderful. Very proud of you. I read it twice, felt the complicated swirl of emotions that came with their belated recognition, and put my phone away. Maybe someday I'd be ready to rebuild something with them. Maybe not. Either way, I'd survived their absence and found my own way forward. The crying in a parking lot version of me felt impossibly far away. That girl had been broken by rejection, yes, but she'd also been brave enough to get on a plane with no plan and 2 suitcases. She'd worked long hours at multiple jobs, lived in a tiny apartment, and bet everything on a dream most people would have called impractical. She'd done that alone. I'd done that alone. Standing outside my cafe on a cool Seattle evening, watching my community gather in a space I created, I finally understood something fundamental. Their absence on graduation day had devastated me. But it had also freed me. I'd stopped waiting for their approval to live my life. I'd stopped measuring my worth against Preston's achievements. I'd found my own path, built my own success, and discovered that I was enough without their validation. The one-way ticket had changed everything, just not in the way I'd imagined while crying in that parking lot. I hadn't flown across the country to escape. I'd flown toward something better, toward the person I was capable of becoming when I stopped trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Graduation day had stolen something from me. But Seattle had given me something better, the knowledge that I could build a meaningful life on my own terms, one carefully pulled espresso shot at a time. I walked back inside my cafe, greeted a customer by name, and got back to work. There were drinks to make, staff to support, and a business to run. My business. My choice. My life. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where a deep disappointment ultimately became your greatest liberation? I'd really love to hear your thoughts down in the comments.